In Washington. He is a former federal prosecutor and FBI consultant. Also in Washington, Deputy Washington Editor for Vox, Caroline Houck, and Jay Shabria, a Republican strategist and former advisor to Governor John Kasich. He is in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you so much to all three of you for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start with a go-around on what your biggest takeaway was from Mueller's statement earlier today. Who wants to kick us off?
Well, I'll go ahead and go. Look, I think the biggest takeaway is really the president's right. There's nothing new here. We heard this in the report before, and Robert Mueller really didn't say anything that was new that warranted the media attention that we're getting. So I think that's the biggest takeaway, that the media seems obsessed with this, but nothing really changed.
Okay, we'll dig into that some more, I believe, as well. So, Caroline, though, your first reaction.
Sure. I think the fact that the special counsel felt the need to have this press conference at all is really, really instructive, right? Like the report is out there, and William Barr has said his piece, and the president has said his piece, but the special counsel still felt the need to come out and reemphasize several points about it. And I think the U.S. public really is paying attention to that, and that speaks volumes to me.
Joseph?
Well, I'll pick up on where Caroline left off. I think Robert Mueller's first words in 2 years are, if it was up to him, his last words. I mean, he does not want to go before Congress, before the cameras, and elaborate on his report. He wants to say, look, I've given you this very thorough 400-page report that says everything I have to say about the matter. It contains the roadmap you, meaning Congress or the American people, need to figure out what I found, and that's it. It speaks for itself. Now, if he's subpoenaed, I think he'll do his duty, but that's the last thing he wants to do.
Caroline, what do you think? Today, was there anything enlightening from Mueller's statements when we compare it to what Attorney General William Barr has been saying in his summary? Because there has been much criticism for Democrats who said that wasn't enough. We want to see the full unredacted version. Any surprises, though, today from Mueller? He didn't exactly say, wink, wink, there's a lot in the redacted portions you don't know about.
Yeah. In fact, I think what was most interesting about Mueller's remarks was not that he said anything particularly revelatory, rather that he focused on the specific line that he would have exonerated the president on obstruction of justice if he'd been able to. He left it at that. He therefore was not able to exonerate him. That was in the report. It's not anything revelatory. I think that's a clear sign that, look, drilling down into this, let's get the full unredacted report is perhaps like a fool's errand in the special counsel's mind, and instead, like, read the bulk of the 448-page report that's already out there.
Jay, clearly when you look at President Trump's tweets today and other Republicans, they're saying this reiterates nothing to see here, let's all move on, although some Republicans are also calling, though, for an investigation into the probe itself, which certainly would keep it all alive. Where do you think it goes from here, from a Republican perspective?
You know, I think from Donald Trump's perspective, this is another good day for him, which is really surprising and counterintuitive. But every time Robert Mueller goes up there and kicks the can to Congress and says, why don't you guys take this up and try impeachment proceedings, that's a good thing for the president. He loves chaos. He loves playing the victim card. That's the roadmap that he's going to see to his reelection success. So I think from a Republican standpoint, from a Donald Trump standpoint, he loves this.
Caroline, what do you think from the Democrats' perspective? Are they dialed into the fact that many people say Mueller was saying, over to you, now do something next? What do you think will happen?
Well, I think it's definitely a mixed bag, right? Jay's right that there is a sense among many moderate Democrats that this is not an issue they want to go whole hog into. I think, like, you see that from Nancy Pelosi's comments today and comments she's made in the past. But then you see this stronger, fervent charge, particularly from some of the candidates running in 2020. You see people like Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, Gillibrand, and Cory Booker coming out very quickly with, this is our moment to step in. This is our moment to begin impeachment proceedings, and we should do so.
Dangerous game, though. I mean, certainly, as you allude to, Nancy Pelosi is not eager to run down the impeachment road.
Certainly not. She said that she would consider it, but only if there was a bipartisan consensus, if there was something so explosive that came out that it generated a bipartisan consensus. And as you can see from the response from staunch conservatives to regular Trump backers, that's not there today. You have people like Lindsey Graham coming out echoing what Jay said, that they're just repeating case closed.
So, Joseph, as we explore possible next steps, help us with this one. Today, Mueller said Justice Department policy prohibits charging a sitting president with a crime. We have heard that many times before. The U.S. Constitution does allow for other processes to formally accuse a president, though. What exactly do you think Mueller was alluding to here?
Well, I think the direct reference was to Congress and Congress's impeachment powers, which is basically to look for treason, bribery, and high crimes and misdemeanors, which is an extremely broad, extremely pliable, subjective standard that's basically whatever every member of Congress decides it is going to be. And so I think that's the direct allusion. The indirect allusion might be, one, charging a non-sitting president. So basically, the day after President Trump is out of office, he can be charged, whenever that may be. And I think the third could be the election, the ballot box, basically, and that the American people can act on this information and decide not to re-elect him, about a year and a half from now. But what Congress is really going to have to do, think about the last month, Congress has largely been fighting in the public domain over process. How did the Attorney General roll out the report? Was he truthful? Should Mueller testify? Do we have the redactions? But at some point, Congress will have to pivot and look at the substance. Congress will have to look at the underlying evidence and decide if that impeachment standard is there. And that's going to be difficult. That's not just sound bites and headlines. That's actually making tough decisions.
Jay, you're nodding there. Help us understand why calls for impeachment are actually something that could be welcomed by some Republicans heading into 2020 election.
Well, look, Nancy Pelosi's been through this before. Republicans went after Bill Clinton in the 90s on impeachment. And guess what? He got reelected. She kind of knows what's going on there. Now, look, remember this. There are 20-some candidates on the Democrat side. We've been on the Republican side before. And they're all fighting amongst each other. And they want to get their slice of the electorate so they can become the nominee. So certainly there's going to be some that are going to pander to the left and the left base that's going to say impeach, impeach, impeach. But most Americans and the American public, they don't care about the process anymore. They kind of want to move past this. They care about jobs. They care about health care, those types of things. And Democrats really need to figure out how to talk to the rest of the country when it's not about some criminal proceedings where the American public has kind of moved on.
So, Caroline, as we start to look forward, a question I want to throw at all of you, actually. In Mueller's closing statement, and he's saying this is the last time I'm speaking publicly, so this is his message he wants to leave with the American people. He reiterated the central allegation of the report that there has been systematic interference in the U.S. elections, in his words. He says this allegation deserves the attention of all Americans. Caroline, maybe you can help us understand why we're not seeing a hue and cry, and why, beyond talking about Trump and to impeach or not, why aren't Americans rising up and saying, someone interfered in our election, how do we prevent this from happening again?
Well, I don't know if I can speak for all Americans, but
Granted, yes.
It's a big task. But I think the reason that you're not seeing much coming out of Washington is because right now it has kind of become a partisan issue. What was once probably a much more bipartisan issue, the security of our nation, the security of the fundamental underpinnings of the U.S. democracy, has become more polarized. You see news reports coming out about the president not wanting to hear from his cabinet level officials or top advisors about Russian interference and the possibility of it in 2020 because he feels it undermines his own election in 2016. You see the Senate, which is the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is passing bills, bipartisan bills, about protecting election infrastructure that then don't go anywhere because the Senate Majority Leader isn't interested in bringing them to the floor. So it's become a partisan issue, I think, is why you're not seeing much more attention paid to it on a national level.
Are Republicans not terribly concerned about the potential for huge interference by a foreign country in their next election?
Well, I do think at the state level where elections are conducted, the secretaries of state, Republican or Democrat, are taking this very seriously. But I do agree that this has become a very partisan issue, especially for the Trump White House, because they don't like this brought up. Because anytime you bring up Russians, they think that the election has become illegitimate. And, I mean, look, I don't happen to share that, but I think that's what they think the press and people that are criticizing them are saying.
And Joseph, what about you, especially from your perspective as a former federal prosecutor, FBI consultant? How worried are you, and what do you think we should be seeing?
Well, so Bob Mueller sees the FBI's dual missions, right? He spent over a decade as its director. One is law enforcement, but the other is protecting the country, its national security. And so I think at the end of the day, his last words are really what he wants to resonate with us, is that, look, beyond this president and this Congress and whether there's an impeachment or whatever happens in the short term, in the long term, Russia, China, North Korea pose significant cyber threats to our country, whether it's in the election realm, in the economic realm, in other areas, and that's the takeaway here. That's what needs to be taken seriously. And this White House has gotten criticism for not verbalizing and putting money behind the necessity to address these national security threats. And I think that's the takeaway that the director wanted us to get from his press conference today.
So as we look forward to the future now, Robert Mueller has resigned. He's made it clear he doesn't want to speak about this anything anymore. Says, in fact, even if you do subpoena me or call me before a committee, I don't have anything new to add. My report speaks for it all. So, Caroline, where do you think the story does go from here?
Well, I think Mueller cast doubt today on testifying. He made very clear that, look, he wants this to be his final word on the subject. And right now there's no subpoenas coming out of the committee that would subpoena him in the House. But I think we saw today the power of a televised appearance from the special counsel, right? Like, this report has been out for weeks in some form or another, whether it's the summary or the report itself. And who among us really has the time to read 448 pages? I mean, that's my job, but I understand it's not something that everyone else gets excited about. And so I think there's some power to having a televised appearance, and whether Democrats decide to go down that path and to subpoena Robert Mueller and have him just sit there and read the report is a possibility. I think it could have power for depending on what their goals are.
So even if he is reiterating what's on paper, you're saying that has value in a different venue?
Yeah, I think it could have strategic and rhetorical value for Democrats, and possibly it would give conservatives the opportunity to say, when he reiterates, look, I didn't come to a criminal conspiracy charge for the president. It could have value both ways. It would be an interesting moment that I think a lot of America would tune into.
Jay, where do you think things go from here?
I think the central question, and it's going to define the Democratic debates, which are going to start pretty soon, it's to impeach or not to impeach. And it's going to kind of frame the way the Democrats think about things, and I don't think that's a good place for them to be. Partly because it's not an issue that's good for them, but secondly, it's also a process question. It gets them away from what a forward-looking message for the country is, and that's going to be a problem.
And Joseph, final word to you on that and the matter of impeachment. Some people say even if that is the way the Democrats do want to proceed, it's too late now. The timing is off. So when it comes to legally how this would all play out, where do you see that going?
Well, I mean, I'll leave to the political prognosticators where we are in the sort of election cycle and whether it's too late or too early. But I think the real issue is, does the alleged offense, the obstruction, and the various examples that Director Mueller laid out in his report, do they resonate with the American people? People are sophisticated. They understand these things. So if there was explicit criminal behavior that was uncovered, I think that would resonate with the public, and they could get behind some kind of impeachment push. The obstruction allegations that are laid out, honestly, I just don't see it. I don't see that a large number of the population getting behind the removal of a president, something that has never happened in our country's history, based on the allegations in Robert Mueller's report. Are they serious? Absolutely. Are they impeachment-level offenses? That's a political decision that every member of Congress will have to make, but in my opinion, humbly, no.
I want to thank all three of you. It was a key day with Robert Mueller finally speaking out after that 2-year investigation, and it's interesting to see where the road might go from here. Joseph Moreno, a former federal prosecutor and FBI consultant, Caroline Houck, deputy Washington editor for Vox, and Jay Shabria, a Republican strategist. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks for having us.
Stay with us. Still ahead.